The technique that will change your life isn't a new method Neville taught in some obscure lecture. It's the one instruction he gave more consistently than any other across 30 years of teaching, and it's the instruction almost everyone applies incorrectly. You already know it. Live from the end. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Most people hear that and think Neville is telling them what to do during their visualization session. Spend 20 minutes vividly imagining the end result, feel it as real, then release it and go about your day. That is not what he meant. Here's the pattern I see again and again. Someone practices SATs every night for months, they get good at it. The scenes feel real, the emotions are vivid, the technique clicks, and it works once, twice, maybe a handful of times. Then the results stop coming, or they come but don't last. The thing manifests and then evaporates. The circumstance appears, but the feeling of having it fades even while it's physically present. No visible reason why the same technique that worked in January fails in March. The reason is structural. You're building the state during 1 hour and dismantling it across the other 23 without realizing it. By the end of this video, you'll know the difference between visiting the state of the wish fulfilled and dwelling in it. And that difference is everything. Neville called this living from the end. And in The Power of Awareness, written in 1952, he made a distinction that most people read straight past. He separated consciousness of something from consciousness from something. Consciousness of means you are aware of the desired state. You think about it, you visualize it, you feel emotions about having it. But you are still perceiving it as separate from yourself, as something out there that you are trying to attract or create. Consciousness from means you are perceiving reality through the lens of the desired state. You are not looking at the wish fulfilled. You are looking at your current world from the position of already being what you wish to be. Most people treat life from the end as an instruction for their SAT session. They spend 15 or 20 minutes vividly imagining the end result. They feel it. They make it real in their mind. Then they open their eyes and return to their normal way of thinking. They have practiced consciousness of the desired state. They have not shifted into consciousness from it. Here's the pattern I've watched repeat with student after student. Someone learns SATs. They practice it every night before bed. They get good at it. The scenes become vivid, the sensory details sharp, the emotional charge strong, and it works. They manifest something small, then something larger. They feel like they have cracked the code. Then the results stop, or the results come but do not last. An opportunity appears and then closes. A relationship manifests and then dissolves. The money comes in and then drains out just as fast. They go back to the lectures. They try to do the technique better, more vividly, more emotionally. Longer sessions, they assume the problem is with the quality of their visualization. It is not. The problem is that they are treating the visualization as the technique itself. The visualization is not the technique. The visualization establishes the state. The technique is dwelling in that state continuously. In his teachings from the late 1940s, Neville used the metaphor of wearing an assumption versus trying on an assumption. An assumption must be worn like a garment you never take off. Most people try it on during their evening practice, feel how well it fits, then remove it and put their old state back on when they return to their day. They visit the state of the wish fulfilled for 20 minutes, then they dwell in the state of lack for 23 hours, and they wonder why the assumption does not harden into fact. Before I show you what continuous dwelling actually looks like, there's a specific mistake most practitioners make within the first hour of waking that undoes their entire night's work. It's not what you'd expect. I'll show you exactly what that mistake is in a few minutes because catching it is the difference between technique knowledge and actual state maintenance. Neville saw this in his own students. He watched people do beautiful imaginal work at night and then dismantle it completely during the day, through doubt, through attention to contradictory circumstances, through the habitual return to their old self-concept. He corrected it with a teaching that almost no one applies correctly. Take someone who has been practicing SATs for 6 months. They want financial abundance. Every night they imagine their bank account filled. They feel the relief and freedom of having plenty. They fall asleep in that state. The session feels real. They trust the technique. But during the day, they check their bank balance obsessively. They feel anxiety when bills arrive. They have conversations with friends where they complain about money being tight. They scroll social media and feel envy when they see others living the life they want. They are spending 1 hour building the state of abundance and 23 hours reinforcing the state of lack. The state they occupy most frequently is the state that externalizes, not the state they occupy most intensely, the state they return to most naturally throughout the day. Neville taught this explicitly in Out of This World, published in 1949. He said the question is not whether you did your technique. The question is which state feels natural to you. If you have to effort your way into the feeling of the wish fulfilled during your practice session, and the feeling of lack is what you return to automatically when your attention is idle, then lack is your actual assumption. The wish fulfilled is just a costume you're trying on at night. Most teachers will tell you the solution is to make your visualization more powerful, add more sensory detail, feel the emotions more deeply, extend your session from 10 minutes to 30. They are wrong. Neville did not teach that intensity during practice determines results. He taught that naturalness outside of practice does. You can have the most vivid, emotionally charged SAT session of your life, and if you spend the next day unconsciously occupying the state of lack, the vivid session means nothing. The law does not respond to effort, it responds to assumption. And your assumption is revealed by which state you return to when no one is watching. In The Law and the Promise, published in 1961, Neville collected testimonials from students who had successfully manifested specific desires. The pattern he noticed was this: the successful ones were not the people who did the longest or most elaborate visualizations. They were the people who, after a brief imaginal act, were able to move through their day with quiet inner conviction that it was already done. They did not keep returning to the visualization obsessively. They did not keep checking for signs. They simply rested in the state. The people who kept repeating the technique compulsively were actually broadcasting doubt. If you truly believed the imaginal act worked, you would not need to do it again. You would simply live from the end. So, what does it actually mean to live from the end across a full day? Let me be specific. First, you do the imaginal act. You enter the state akin to sleep. You construct a short scene that implies the wish fulfilled. You feel it as real. You loop it until it takes on sensory vividness. This plants the seed. This is not the complete technique. This is the construction phase. Second, when you wake the next morning, you do not immediately check whether it worked. You do not scan your external reality for evidence. The moment you start looking for proof, you have shifted back into consciousness of the desired state. You are treating it as something separate that you are waiting to appear. Instead, you move through your morning from the position of the wish fulfilled, not thinking about having it, thinking from having it. Here is the difference. Thinking about wealth means you imagine having money, you visualize financial freedom, you hope it comes soon. Thinking from wealth means you perceive your current circumstances through the lens of someone who already has abundance. Your self concept is different. Your internal dialogue is different. The thoughts that arise naturally when your attention is idle are different. Now, here's the part Neville taught explicitly but almost no one emphasizes. There's a diagnostic you can run on yourself that tells you instantly whether you're dwelling in the state or just visiting it during practice. It's not about tracking manifestations, it's about tracking something far more immediate. I'll give you that diagnostic in the next section because without it, you're operating blind. Third, throughout the day, you notice where your attention goes when you are not consciously directing it. This is the diagnostic most people never run. When you are driving, when you are in the shower, when you are waiting in line, when you are falling asleep at night, what does your mind return to automatically? If it returns to worry, to doubt, to rehearsing problems, to imagining worst case scenarios, then that is your actual state. That is what you are assuming to be true about yourself and your reality. Fourth, when you catch yourself dwelling in the old state, you do not restart the technique. You do not go back to the beginning and do another full visualization. You simply return to the new state. This is not suppression. This is not pretending. This is reoccupying the state you established during your imaginal act. You ask yourself one question: Am I thinking from the wish fulfilled or about the wish fulfilled? If you are thinking about it, shift back to thinking from it. Nothing here requires talent. It requires attention to the hours you have been ignoring. Actually, let me rephrase that. The hours are not the problem. Your lack of awareness about what is happening in those hours is the problem. Most people manage their 1 hour of practice beautifully and leave the other 23 hours completely unmanaged. The assumption they are trying to harden is being built for 1 hour and demolished for 23. Of course, it never solidifies. Neville used an analogy in a lecture from 1951 that makes this clear. He said you would not build the foundation of a house in the morning, tear it down in the afternoon, rebuild it in the evening, and then wonder why the house never appears. Yet this is exactly what people do with their assumptions. They construct the state during their practice session. Then they dismantle it through contradictory thoughts, emotions, and attention throughout the day. Then they rebuild it again the next evening. The state is in constant flux. It never has time to harden into fact. The technique that will change your life is not a better visualization method. It is learning to dwell in the state between sessions. I have put together a short diagnostic in the description that walks through how to track this across a full day. It is free. It will help you identify exactly where your state breaks down when you are not actively practicing. If you want to go deeper on this, that is where to start. Now, let me show you what this looked like in Neville's own life, because the story most people know is not the full story. In December of 1933, Neville was living in New York City. He wanted to travel to Barbados for Christmas to see his family. He had no money for the trip. He went to his teacher Abdullah and told him the problem. Abdullah's response was immediate. "You are in Barbados, Neville." Neville protested. He explained that he was physically in New York, that he had no funds, that the trip was impossible. Abdullah repeated the instruction, "You are in Barbados." Neville went home. That night, he did not visualize being in Barbados. He slept in his New York apartment, assuming he was already in Barbados. He felt the tropical air, he heard the sounds, he occupied the state of already being there. He did not do this as a practice session and then return to his normal consciousness. He maintained the state. When he woke, he thought from Barbados, not about Barbados. Within days, he received a letter from his brother offering to pay for the trip. The money came. He went to Barbados for Christmas. The entire sequence from assumption to manifestation took less than 2 weeks. Most people focus on the imaginal act when they hear this story. That is the wrong part to focus on. The imaginal act took maybe 5 minutes. The part that mattered was what Neville did for the 9 or 10 days between the imaginal act and the manifestation. He did not spend his waking hours hoping it would work. He did not check his mailbox obsessively waiting for a solution. He did not rehearse backup plans in case it failed. He occupied the state of already being in Barbados and let the bridge of incidents unfold. That is the technique. The imaginal act was just the starting gun. 10 years later, in 1943, Neville was drafted into the United States Army at age 38. He was stationed at Camp Polk in Louisiana. He did not want to be there. He wanted an honorable discharge so he could return to his apartment in New York and continue his lectures. Every night in the barracks, he fell asleep assuming he was already back in his own bed in New York. He did not visualize the discharge paperwork. He did not imagine the process of leaving the army. He simply occupied the state of already being home. This went on for 9 days. During those 9 days, he did not spend his waking hours complaining about army life or hoping for a way out. He moved through his duties while dwelling in the state of the wish fulfilled. On the ninth day, the Army granted him an honorable discharge under Regulation 615 360, paragraph 5. He returned to New York. The technique was the same in both stories. A brief imaginal act to establish the state, then continuous occupation of that state until it externalized, not hoping, not waiting, dwelling. By his later years, Neville had become even more direct about this. In lectures from the 1960s, he taught that most people spend their entire lives thinking about what they want to be instead of actually being it. The whole technique collapses into one question. Are you living in the wish fulfilled, or are you living in your current circumstances while thinking about the wish fulfilled? If you cannot tell the difference, you are doing the latter. Before I give you tonight's protocol, there's one detail about your waking baseline state that determines whether you're actually dwelling or just practicing well. It's not something you monitor during your session, it's something you catch in a completely different part of your day. I'll tell you exactly where to look for it now, because this is what separates practitioners who get sporadic results from practitioners who get reliable ones. If you have been practicing SATs for 6 months or longer and your results are still inconsistent, the problem is not the technique. The problem is you are only using the technique for 1 hour and abandoning it for the rest of the day. You are building the state at night and tearing it down during the day without realizing it. The imaginal act is working, your waking consciousness is undoing it. That is the gap. And until you close that gap, your results will remain sporadic, no matter how vivid your visualizations become. Here is exactly what to do tonight. First, you will do your imaginal act as you normally would. Keep it short, one scene that implies the wish fulfilled. Loop it until it feels real. Fall asleep in it. Second, when you wake tomorrow morning, catch the very first thought that arises about who you are and what your life is. That thought will reveal your actual state. Third, if that thought contradicts the wish fulfilled, do not panic and do not restart the technique. Simply return to the state. Ask yourself what you would be thinking right now if the wish fulfilled were already fact. Think that instead. Do this every time you notice you have slipped back into the old state. This is not about perfection. You will slip, everyone does. The technique is noticing when you have slipped and returning to the state, not once a day during your practice session, continuously. The imaginal act plants the assumption. Your waking fidelity to that assumption is what allows it to harden into fact. The reason Live from the End has not been working consistently is not because you are doing it wrong during your practice session, you are doing it perfectly. The imaginal act is vivid, the emotion is real, the state is established. The breakdown happens in the hours between sessions when you unconsciously return to your old state without noticing. You have been visiting the wish fulfilled for 1 hour and dwelling in lack for the rest of the day. The imaginal act plants the assumption. But if you dismantle it every day through habitual thought patterns, contradictory self concept, and attention to opposing evidence, the assumption never has time to harden. The technique is not broken. Your application of it outside the technique is what needs attention. Seeing this is the easy half. You can already feel where your consciousness goes when it is not being actively managed. You know which thoughts arise automatically when your attention is idle. You know whether those thoughts align with the wish fulfilled or contradicted. The realization is instant. Installing a state that holds across your full waking day is the work. It is the half almost no one walks you through, because a diagnosis is easy to give away and a protocol is not. You need a way to track where the state breaks down during your unmanaged hours. You need a structured method to catch yourself slipping back into the old assumption and return to the new one without restarting the entire technique. And you need it to be specific to the desire you are actually working with, not generic advice about staying positive. So there is a specific next step for the people who want to actually close it. If you want the imaginal work you are already doing to stop evaporating between sessions, the tool built for that is the source code diagnostic. It walks you through the exact protocol for identifying which of your unmanaged hours is dismantling the state you built during practice, and it gives you the return sequence Neville's successful students use to reoccupy the wish fulfilled without repeating the imaginal act obsessively. It is free, the link is in the description below this video. Tonight, after you do your imaginal act, pay attention to the very first thought that arises when you wake tomorrow morning. That thought will tell you whether you are dwelling in the wish fulfilled or just visiting it at night. Neville said in his 1950s lectures, assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled and observe the route that your attention follows. The route your attention follows when no one is watching is your actual assumption. Track it. That is where the work is.